So let's try something different. Today I will be doing a review for an anime called The Eminence of Shadow. I know it's a little bit unorthodox coming from my YouTube channel, but I wanted to try at least something different and see how this performs. This video will be containing a whole lot of anime, and it may confuse many of you who are not fans of the anime media. Either way, hopefully you will enjoy it. Every year seems to have that one big isekai to try it out and check out, and for everyone's attention to be, gazed into it. 2021 was Mishiko Tensei, 2020 was My Next Life as a Villainess, 2019 was The Shield Hero, and etc. While there varies in popularity, the point being is that while we get multiple isekais every year, there are one that just stands out of the respective years. 2022 felt like a rather quiet year for isekais, with only a couple notable new ones like Isekai Ojisan and Trapped in the Dating Sim. But the big one that stands out, that would definitely be this anime that I'm doing a review right now, The Eminence of Shadow. Apart from that, when you look back now, very stacked full of 2022 season, this one was definitely felt like a big new isekai release of the year, and light novels readers swearing by that it was one of the funniest things that they've read. Well, I took up their word and I decided to check it out for myself. As what I think, well, I'll share it right now. The story follows Sid Kagenoa. Basically, I'm just gonna call him a Sid, the young man who desires one thing: power and lots of it. However, it's only until he isekai's by basically being crushed by a truck, as typical as ever in any isekai games or movies or animes. Basically, he's being reborn to a fantasy world. He finds the power that he has been looking for. Using this newfound power, he begins this new life. By day, being a common background character by underneath the vigilante called Shadow. And with others he rescues, with the promise of power, he forms a group called Shadow Garden and fights against the cult of Diablos, worshippers of the Demon King, or at least what he makes up. That's actually what he really makes up. With the way that people were talking about how funny this is, I was expecting to be laughing right off the bat, but that wasn't really the case. If anything, it was more amusing than funny. With only a couple of scenes that did give me a good laugh, it wasn't really till the episode 5 with the infamous I am atomic scene where my opinion just seriously changed. I started to find this show really hilarious. That's the main thing I criticized the show's story for it, and it's just how slow it is, unfortunate that it gets to start. It did take a while to get into the groove to make me appreciate its intentions, because this obviously is trying to find its footing. It's trying to set itself up and establish those intentions, but it's slow in the process, leaving it a bit underwhelming actually. But it was after episode 5 where my opinion started to change, because it was now established its identity. Again, the I am atomic scene was just turning point for me, because it was something so over the top and funny, and such a big pivotal point in the plot that it made me realize that it is now a fully telling of what kind of show this is. Plus, it's such a great scene, a perfect microcosm as to what this kind of character Sid is, and still makes me chuckle just thinking about it. Even now that I'm thinking about it, it's still incredible. Now, it wasn't just that it was funny, it was absolutely awesome to look at. It was beautifully done on top of that too. After that, the show definitely hits a stride, because now we know how the story is gonna go about and what kind of character Sid is. One of the main things that makes this show funny is how far Sid's bullshit is actually true, where he made up the cult of Diablos only for it to be true, but he doesn't even realize it. The rest of the Shadow Garden know it is to be true, but Sid only goes along with it because he gotta maintain an appearance as a shadow. The show has the same mindset as Sid, and that is how much spectacles can we make it and then time correctly for extra dramatic effects. Once you start realizing the length Sid will go for that extra dramatic effect. The best part about it is the length Sid will go to make interaction with more intensive and dramatic, but doesn't need to tell you because you already know. It may hint at some things but never directly tell you. The power of imagination works wonders, and the show uses just that to its advantage to make the scene that much funnier. One thing about the plot though that I'm conflicted a little bit about though is just how convenient the plot can be at times. This is because how prevalent the cult of Diablos is and how wherever they go or whatever they do, the cult of is going to be involved, or these characters are related to the cult in some ways. It gets a bit tedious perhaps, but the cult will show up in some ways without much build up for it. That being said, the double-edged sword, as while it gets tedious, it's funny how Sid just simply stumbles upon it, and just like that, he simply accepts it and goes along with it. So it's both a good and a bad thing, because it does work when you look at it one way, but at the same time it doesn't well look at it on the other way as well. Sid is the heart and soul of the series. At most, the show humor usually revolves around him. At its core, Sid is essentially tunable, as he tends to act as how he sees fit. You see Sid throughout things how he approaches various situations and how he thinks he should act. He roleplays a multiple character and thinks hard as how to go about it in order to maintain appearance, in order to not raise suspicion from other people. He's kind of like Ainz from the Overlord in a way, but whereas Ainz is forced to roleplay his evil Lich avatar, Sid is willingly roleplays as a different character. Whereas to be a nobody background character or a vigilante shadow, he will be thorough as to how he should approach it with one goal in mind, to make it look cool. Well, what he thinks is cool. For us, that can come off a bit maybe cringe, but in a good way. This makes it funny because its lens and intricate details he'll go through, to make it dramatic as possible for added effects because of his mind. Because in his mind, it would make the whole thing cool and badass, even though it comes across silly to us, yet shocks the people he engages with. But that only half of the time, and as the other half is him either trolling people for fun, or he's just simply winging it, which just makes the antics even funnier. The best part about it, like I said already, he doesn't really need to explain everything. Whether it will be a dueling tournament or the Excalibur scene or even just stealing a piano just because it would make him look cool, it really does help with the show's humor that he acts like this, and it's just the mainline highlight of the show. Now, as for the members of the Shadow Garden, I don't know how I feel about that. On one hand, their personalities are clearly defined to understand what kind of character they are. But on the other hand, I felt like they just don't get enough time with them to get to know them better, especially compared to some of the other supporting characters in the series. Granted, the cast of characters is quite large and some have more significance to the plot than others, but considering their importance, I kinda wanted a bit more balance out, because when it comes to the screen time, Alpha and Beta takes up a lot of it. Really, it's the cast of outside of the Shadow Garden that takes the spotlight, mainly Alexia. Alexia is easily the best character in the series outside of Sid. She provides just as much good comedy as Sid does due to her headstrong nature, her short temperament, and the fact that she will tolerate no shit from anyone. It's mainly her interactions with Sid, or like Shadow, that brings out the best of her. Whether it be for serious moments or perhaps some kind of comedy, the show's comedic moments. With episode 11 probably being the best between the two. Now, it's kind of surprising how much staying power she has, as I thought that she would be a one and done character, but I'm glad that she wasn't and does stick around for the rest of the story. Honestly though, the show's cast kind of reminds me of Overlord's cast, to use that as a comparison way of course. Because no matter how big or small the role they play in a story, they will leave some sort of an impression to make them stand out and more recognizable, and most of them do get their own time and spotlight to shine. It's same with the Eminence in Shadow it is with the Overlord. It's, despite some criticism with the screen time and the most important characters, it does do things similar to Overlord, where it will do its best to make characters distinct from one another, and honestly, I do think it works, and helped the cast as whole, enjoyable to watch. Hell, with the little screen time Delta, Gamma, and Epsilon get, they do make it worth it, and along with other characters like Ares, Rose, and even Sid's sister Claire. Although there is one blemish to it, however, with the cast that is the villains and how they're pretty much really forgettable and very comically evil. But it makes it more funny. When their hubris is shot, when Zed hands their asses to them on a silver platter, but that just means they're merely vessels to make Zed and the rest of the Shadow Garden look better. Studio Nexus takes the reign for this series, whose last anime was all the way in the winter of 2020 with the Def Games anime. Anyway, the animation for the Eminence in Shadow is generally good, and the fights are done well enough that they don't feel bored to watch, especially in the last few episodes. That being said, some of the best scenes to happen when the animation starts the best with how they frame it to give that added effect, especially when Zed is trying to act cool. Character design as well help with the making each character more distinct from each other. It's easier more often than not to tell which characters by their looks. Hell, Zed's design, as for generic and boring as it looks, actually fits the background character motive as he was going for. And that generally goes for the rest of the cast as well, as they pretty much look how they act. They may come as of looking generic, but they do just enough to avoid the bogged standard design and yet still fit the character with the personality. What I like the most about the Shadows soundtrack is how it's used. While it doesn't apply to all the pieces of the soundtrack, some of the songs that are used for both the show's action scenes and show's comedic scenes, it is still effective in both scenes because the context is pretty much the same. It's just done in different ways, so it doesn't feel like it's copying itself. The best example is Shadow, where it's used primarily as a battle theme for Zed, but part of it also used with the Excalibur scene because the character who is interacting with Zed are at awe because of him. But other than that, I really do like the soundtrack, being able to match the scene really well and never tries to up the tempo that much. Mainly staying cool and collect to match the main protagonist, but when it wants to, it can reach the climax of the scene and match whatever is happening on screen and give it that big payoff. Despite it's some sort of a little bit of a slow start, The Eminence in Shadow is a show I had really good time with. I thought its humor was very funny once you fully grasp its show's intentions. I thought that the cast of characters were generally good and fun to watch, and the animation and OST was surprisingly good. I thought these elements were put at good use to make a very entertaining anime that I didn't think of much at the beginning. That's the thing, I didn't think I would end up liking the show as much as I did. First impressions when compared to the expectations were disconnected from one another. Yet I gave it a chance and I was rewarded. Between the cringe yet badass scenes, the intricate role-playing, the well-used original soundtrack, Alexia as well, just in general, and just knowing that it wants to be and goes with just makes it a lot better than it was looking out to be. Does it have any flaws? Well, yes, of course, that is much is clear, but some of those issues can be fixed with another season. It is a show where you just need to go along with the flow to enjoy it, but doesn't make it hard to go along with it, and once you do, you'll find a show that's definitely punches above its weight, and is probably the most enjoyable new isekai that come out in 2022. Is it the best though? It's honestly debatable. Now, of course, if you're a fan of Overlord like me, and then you're going to have a field day with this anime, as the similarities are quite strong. Now, unfortunately, it isn't an isekai that's going to shatter people's feelings of a genre, but it is a fun one, and that is what really truly matters. If I would have had to give it a score, I'll definitely give it a 9 out of 10. Do like and subscribe, tell me down in the comments as well what did you think of this anime if you had a chance of or an opportunity of checking it out. If you have not, like I said, I highly recommend it. See you guys all, have a wonderful day.